So, when you think of your dream job, what comes to mind? Author, YouTuber, game developer, or maybe professional athlete? Well, all of those sound fine and all, but have you considered professional brothel reviewer, and in a fantasy world at that? Well, that's the premise of the manga Interspecies Reviewers, the story of a group of brave gentlemen and an intersex angel who set out to review a brothel for every humanoid species in the world. Should you read it? Well, by the end of this video, I hope to have answered that question. Oh, and by the way, if it wasn't already blindingly obvious from the preamble before this video will cover explicit content, so viewer discretion is advised. The general gist of Interspecies Reviewers' story is this. Some adventurers decided to write brothel reviews and sell them at the tavern. Said adventurers find that they've stumbled upon a fairly good business model. Then, just as some magical girl series might have a monster of the week, this series has a monster girl of the week. And we watch as our protagonists go on various sexual adventures with said monster girls. There doesn't really seem to be much progression story-wise from chapter to chapter, other than Krim, the angelic member of the group, slowly becoming slightly more worldly and less holy. But yeah, you're not reading this for the plot. Now, why would you want to read this? Let's start by being very clear. This manga is not a straight-up hentai. For those of you who've watched the anime, the manga isn't quite as explicit. Also, while the art is fully decent, I don't know that I'd say it's good enough to justify reading this just for the fan service. No, you should read this because it's freaking hilarious. First off, all the sexual humor here works so much better because they can take it all the way. The writer clearly has no sense of shame, and as such, the reader has no need to either. There's this vast body of sexual humor that has never been explored because it's too racy for your standard comedy and too well written for your average hentai. But as this story beautifully straddles the line between those two, it has access to all of it. Also, hey, have you ever wanted to discuss sexual fetishes but have been too embarrassed to bring it up with your friends? Well, this story has you covered. From purely scientific perspective, there's so much you can learn from this story. It will open your mind to all sorts of interesting kinks, some of which you may not have come across before, and some which may influence your search history going forwards. Even for the ones you're not really into, you have the reviews to look forward to at the end of the chapter. 'Cause God knows, if any one of the given kinks made you feel a bit uncomfortable, one of the reviewers probably felt a fair bit worse. And the schadenfreude feels pretty nice. Aside from that, even just seeing the reviewers' wildly different feelings about a given, shall we say, experience is pretty amusing. Somewhat fittingly, for a series called Interspecies Reviewers, the reviews are often the best part of any given chapter. So, what might you not like about this story? Well, if you're a straight woman, this story may not cater to you quite as much. Other than the one intersex angel, this story is very much told from a male perspective, and the fanservice and comedy is all aimed at a male audience. That's not to say that no woman will enjoy this series, but let's just say it caters about as heavily to guys as yaoi fanfic caters to fujoshis. Other than that, there's no end of concepts in this story that will no doubt horribly offend some people, even outside of the puritanical types. There's the chapter with the equivalent of a Build-A-Bear workshop for prostitutes, which could be construed as dehumanizing of sex workers. There's another one with fairies, which are probably a bit too small for some people's comfort. And how the intersex character is dealt with in the story may feel a bit ham-fisted to some. I think a lot of it depends on how seriously you're taking this story. If you want to analyze it deeply and look at what message it sends to poor, impressionable minds, then yeah, you might hate it. But if you're reading it for a fun ride, then there's nothing too problematic and all the sex in the story is consensual. This brings us to the verdict. Should you read Interspecies Reviewers? Well, personally, I can say I laughed loudly and frequently while reading it, so yeah, it has my recommendation. Just don't read it at work or school. You probably wouldn't want anyone coming over to see what you're laughing about. As for alternate reading recommendations, if you've already read this, you could always try Shimineta. The story of obscene terrorists fighting absurd censorship laws, which is probably the closest thing I've seen to having Reviewers' style of sexual comedy. Anyways, thanks for listening to this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Cheers!